So, what do we have? We have the fact that money adds nothing whatsoever to our lives. It replaces bartering, and that was how the idea was sold to us. But we've also realised that everything we would ever need has been provided to us for free, so there's no need to barter. All we need to understand is the need to share in a reasonable and responsible manner. That if someone is prepared to grow food and wants a television, then he or she can just go and get a TV from someone else who makes them, in exchange for the person who makes TVs being able to take the food grown by the farmer, and so on. The food was given freely to the farmer by Mother Earth, and the minerals that constitute the electronic components necessary for the creation of the TV set were also supplied freely by Mother Earth. Their time and effort was the only other major component necessary. In both cases, they will have minimised their own time and effort by means of available automation. Prior to automation, they would both have used more effort, but the same fundamental arguments apply. The point is that no methods of payment are ever required. Thus, no money is required. Money and associated accountancy are simply unnecessary overheads on the reality of any given situation. But how is it that the illusion of money has become so ingrained? Why have we not been able to see the wood for the trees? Well, one major reason is given in my book. The fact that we have always been forced to live with one person in every 25 who are psychopathic. And the fact that the remaining 24 out of the 25 have not recognised that fact. And this has led to the 25th, the psychopath, being able to rise to the top of the tree in all major so-called professions, and to impose various forms of domination by means of carefully constructed deceptions designed to render them untouchable. I discussed money first of all because it is indeed the root of all evil, the root of all deceptions. The idea that it is somehow necessary leads naturally to the second deception, legalese. Legalese is the language of statutory so-called laws. I say so-called because they are not actually as hard and fast as real laws, and I'll explain why in a few moments. But before I do that, I need to explain the whole point of legalese. If you check up by reading statutes, you'll discover that just about everything reduces to some form of punishment for anyone who violates it. And that punishment is some form of a fine or prison or both, since we did away with execution in the UK in the 1960s. Prison is a punishment by the removal of liberty, i.e. freedom to travel, and is generally considered to be the ultimate sanction these days. Although it is a real possibility that someone who violates a legalese statute can end up in prison, it is generally used as a threat to make one pay up rather than go to prison. So it could easily be argued that legalese is designed to make you pay up, primarily. And then, only if you are really bolshy, a bit like me, will you actually end up incarcerated. In point of fact, the idea of incarceration is a double-edged sword because of the costs of keeping each inmate in prison. This is an aspect that most of those engaged in the legalese system, that's politicians, police, magistrates, lawyers, judges, etc., either forget or most likely have never even considered. For example, I do happen to know that in 1993 it cost £2,500 per inmate per week, and I doubt if the cost has gone down in the intervening years. So that's another reason why legalese is designed to make you pay up rather than anything else. And of course, paying up means we're back to money. So for Legalese to operate with any degree of success, money is an essential component. Or conversely, Legalese could not operate without money. Or to put it another way, or the final way, the deception of money fully supports the deception of Legalese. So now the question is, why is Legalese a deception? Well, as I said before, it is the language of statutes. And what is a statute? It's defined as the legislated rule of a society. So, what is a society? Well, what is a society? You tell me. We know there are societies. I could name the Cooperative Wholesale Society as one in the UK, or the Law Society, or of course building societies. In point of fact, a society is a group of like-minded people who have got together to deliberate, determine and act towards common goals. Shall I repeat that? A society is a group of like-minded people who have got together to deliberate, determine and act towards common goals. And there are some very important characteristics about any society. First and foremost, it has to specify its goals. Then people can determine whether or not they themselves feel they have something in common with those goals. Anyone who does have something in common with the society's stated goals can then join the society and thereby help to create the common goals. See, by virtue of a society's membership, all agreeing and thinking along the same lines, you now have common goals, don't you? Then the membership can continue to deliberate, determine and act towards them, can't they? And they do that by creating legislative rules, in other words, statutes. Well, all that's fair enough. People should be free to do that. Well, why not? But let's take a closer look. Firstly, do the legislated rules of a society apply to people who have not joined the society? Well, how do you answer that question? Well, think. Are you a member of the Law Society? Yes. Then their rules apply to you, don't they? No? You're not a member of the Law Society? Do you obey the Law Society's rules then? You don't? Oh, quite right. The legislative rules of any society only bind in law those who are members. They do not bind anyone who is not a member. Otherwise, there would be no point in having a society in the first place, would there? Unless you can have members bound by its rules and non-members not needing to take any notice of them. And of course, if non-members are also bound by the rules any society creates, then everyone is bound by the rules of all societies. For example, members of the Law Society would be bound by the rules of the Cooperative Wholesale Society and vice versa. Silly situation it would be, wouldn't it? Actually, it would be a ridiculous situation all round, of course. Consider your doctor and your lawyer. Ask your lawyer if he or she is bound by the Hippocratic Oath. What do you think they would say? I think they would say, no, I'm not a doctor. Of course I'm not bound by the Hippocratic Oath. Ask your doctor if he or she is bound by the rules of the Law Society. What do you think they would say? I think they would say, I'm a doctor, bound by the Hippocratic Oath. I'm not bound by the rules of the Law Society. I don't even know or care what they are. But what does your common sense tell you? No, if a society makes its rules, only its members are bound by those rules. But here's the cruncher. How do you become a member? Is this somehow automatic? Is that possible? I don't think so. I think you apply to join. And if your application is accepted, then you become a member. Isn't that the way it works? Isn't that the only way it could ever work? What does your common sense tell you? But wait, there's a bit more. What happens if, after having joined a society, you discover that the goals you imagined to be the same as yours evolve as society deliberates, determines and acts into a direction you disagree with? What happens then? I would hope that your common sense tells you you resign. You resign from the society whose direction you find you can no longer support. So now let's place all that into the context of Parliament and government. Well, a bill is placed before Parliament with the view to it becoming an Act of Parliament, obtaining the royal assent, and thus becoming a statute, a legislative rule of a society. And note, I did not use the word law. To give these deceivers their due, they don't even call them laws, do they? They call them bills, acts and statutes. They actually avoid using the word law. Ever thought of that? Well, okay, which society are these the legislated rules? Oh, our society. Well, hold on. What do you mean by our society? Remember, you have to apply for membership to be a member of a society. When did you apply for membership of our society? What did you write? Did you send your CV? Was your membership application approved? And were you accepted? Oh, you didn't apply. You can't remember applying. Oh, then how do you know you are a member of this amorphous our society thing? And by the way, what is the name of this society? A society must have a name. It must actually be called something. For example, the Halifax Building Society and so on, mustn't it? Otherwise, what does it mean? How can you define the membership of our society? And just suppose, just for 1 minute, you don't agree with the legislated rules created for our society. How do you resign your membership? Or when the common goals are no longer acceptable to you, for example, where the common goal is to join the European Union and you fundamentally disagree with that common goal. The deception is that you are considered by those at the top, the psychopaths, to be a member of something you never made an application for. They are imposing legislative rules that you don't necessarily agree with, and they have not provided any mechanism for you to resign. Well, that's rather wonderful, isn't it? What does your common sense think about that? Does your common sense tell you that's not right, totally unacceptable, not honourable, in fact totally dishonourable and unjust and utterly ludicrous on top? Well, mine does. And the fact that this was never explained to me at school is, I leave you to answer that aspect from your own common sense. And that's why I referred to statutes created by Parliament as so-called law. It is creating legislative rules, and always has, but who knows what for? There is only one reasonable answer. Those who are prepared to be bound by them. Well, who could this be? Well, members of Parliament themselves, I would think, since they are making them. On top of that, I would suppose solicitors, lawyers, notaries, barristers, judges, court clerks and magistrates, since they seem to be quite happy to apply them. And lastly, policemen, since they seem to be quite happy to use them in order to promulgate their obvious desire for thuggery under the guise of enforcing these statutes. I suppose you could also include anyone who voted for the members of Parliament. But I don't see how anyone who did not vote for these crooks could be said to be bound by something they had absolutely no hand in creating. I don't see how. To say I have a vote is fine to a limited extent, But when I don't use it, I'm simply saying none of the above, because none of the above is not on the ballot paper. If none of the above was on the ballot paper, I would put my X against it, but it never is. So there is no way I'm able to say what I want to say, except by simply not taking part in the whole charade. And anyway, it makes absolutely no difference whose name my X is placed against, for the simple reason that, in order to take a seat in the House of Commons, an MP must swear allegiance to the Queen. So, at the end of the day, irrespective of party, there was actually no difference between them. They all just lick the Queen's boots for a living, to put it bluntly. So maybe we can't actually blame those who waste their time voting, so maybe they shouldn't be bound by these legislated rules after all. Because, after all, the resulting statutes are actually what the Queen wants, not what everyone else wants. But you haven't heard the best bit anyway. The statutes themselves, the legislated rules of the society that doesn't really exist because it has no members who have actually applied to join, are actually written in a foreign language. Well, how about that? You are expected to obey the rules of a society you don't in practice belong to, and the rules are written in a foreign language. Well, if that's not deception on a massive scale, I'll eat my... Well, I would if I wore one. How is it a foreign language? Well, it's not English, that's why. Not plain Oxford English. Not the English we normally speak and converse with. A language, any language, requires a dictionary in order to define the meanings of words. In plain English, we have dictionaries. The Oxford English is one, and there are also Chambers and Webster's for variations, in other words, American English. And sure enough, Legalese has its own dictionaries, so that's a big clue. If Legalese were plain English, it would not require its own dictionaries, would it? Well, what does your common sense tell you about that? In point of fact, Legalese is probably best described as an English look-alike, because it does use English words with a smattering of Latin thrown in for good measure, but some words, some very important words, have a slightly different meaning. The meaning of some words are expanded. They mean more than they would normally mean to you and I. A good example is the word understand, which to you and I means the same as comprehend. It still means that in Legalese, but it also means stand under. And it is used in the context of when, for example, a policeman cautions you. He or she will end up saying, "Do you understand?" If you say yes, then you are agreeing to stand under the jurisdiction of the statute you are being accused of violating. If you consider that you never applied for membership of the society's rules the policeman is quoting, then the correct answer is no, I do not stand under. Since the police don't have a clue about all this, they will not understand, comprehend, why you said that. But a High Court judge would. Another expansion is the word person. This is a real humdinger. In Legalese, a person is still a natural human being, but it is also any grouping, partnership, corporation, company, society, etc. Frankly, the absurdity of that boggles my common sense. A human being has a mind and can decide something. A human being has limbs and can, for example, hold a pen and sign something. A human being can be made responsible for their actions. A corporation can only decide anything by means of a meeting and probably a vote, for example, a board of directors voting. A corporation has no limbs and cannot therefore sign anything. If a signature is required, a human being, an authorised company representative, must be tasked to do the job. And if there are any ramifications to any action taken, a corporation can indefinitely pass the buck as a high-level game of musical chairs. How can a corporation be equivalent to a human being? The idea is utterly absurd, but that's legalese, the language of statutes passed by Parliament. The deception is that you think they are laws that are binding upon you. They are not. They are the legislated rules of a society you never applied to join. Since you never applied to join, you are not a member and not bound by them, unless you agree, unless you consent. They are, in point of fact, the law of waters, maritime law, commerce law, equity law, call it what you like. The deception is that they are used and applied to you on dry land, and to obtain your consent by the most deceptive means available. The first way is by your silence. If you stay silent, they assume your consent as tacit consent. The second way is if you act as if you consent. And you will normally do that unless you realise what's going on. The only out you have is to specifically refuse consent, which is, no, I don't stand under, for example. But you have to hold that line continually. One small slip, and they'll have you as a tacit consenter. And you have to bear in mind that the police have absolutely no idea about all this and what they're doing. So you have to be prepared not to sign anything under any circumstances and whatever threats are made against you, on the basis that when it gets to court, you can refuse the court permission to adjudicate and not be tricked into submission at that point. Part of the deception is done by means of your name, and by deception making you think that you and your name are one and the same thing. Because in the world of legalese, they are always acting against a name. You must have a name for them to act against. But you'll say, everybody has a name, don't they? Well, it's true that everybody is given a name by their parents when they're born. That much is true. But firstly, did you ask for it? Did you accept it? And more importantly, is it actually you? Is your name actually you, the flesh and blood? If someone says to me, are you Veronica Chapman? Or even, are you Veronica? I can truthfully say no. Because I am not a name. I am a flesh and blood, sovereign human being with a living soul. And I'm not a name. A name is nothing more than marks on a sheet of paper, pixels on a computer screen, or pressure waves in the air if it's sounded or spoken. And I am none of these things. I did not arrive on this earth with a name tattooed on my arm or forehead, etc. I was given a name. It was attached to me. And at one point in my life, by deed poll, I detached one name and attached a different one. But I still remained the same flesh and blood even after this detachment and attachment process. So it proves my name isn't me. So, are you Veronica? The answer is no, I'm not a name, I'm flesh and blood, is a perfectly honest and truthful answer. Are you the flesh and blood to which the name Veronica Chapman has been attached at this moment in time is a valid question, and the answer in my case would truthfully be yes. Shortening this question to become, are you Veronica Chapman, misses out too much of the essentials created by the deceptions. In point of absolute fact, the name Veronica Chapman isn't even owned by me, it's owned by the Vatican. Your name, whatever it is, isn't owned by you either, it's owned by the Vatican. Consequently, when anyone in so-called authority acts against the name on behalf of the Vatican, as they are actually doing, the Vatican is acting against itself. And you, the flesh and blood, are really just an onlooker, if the truth be known. And if the deceptions are understood, comprehended, I mean. The deception is to convince you from birth to death that you are your name, and you are not. And that's why I introduce myself as Veronica of the Chapman family, as commonly called. Because Veronica is not my name. Veronica is simply what I'm called. It is simply what I'm prepared to respond to if I read it or hear it. That's it. Veronica as I'm commonly called. However, there is more than one Veronica in the world. And if I'm in close proximity to some other Veronica, then to distinguish my flesh and blood from some other flesh and blood, then use my family, as in Veronica of the Chapman family, to call me. Now, the point is this. Legalese cannot call me in that way. It is only capable of acting against one of its own names. For example, Veronica Chapman, or Miss Veronica Chapman, or Ms. Veronica Chapman. Legalese does not cater for acting against Veronica of the Chapman family, as commonly called. That's way outside its scope. You see, the name, for example, Veronica Chapman, is the name of a little ship. Legalese, which is the law of the seas, maritime law, thinks I'm a little ship and I'm named that way. It thinks I'm a little ship that can be treated as a little corporation by means of my name. All corporations have a name, you see. Corporations cannot be commonly called because who would respond? If I called out Southern of the electricity family, who would or could respond? If I write to them, addressing them that way, which human being would I be writing to? Is there a Southern of the electricity family who works for the company, Southern Electricity? What do you think? I think some employees of Southern Electricity would pick up my letter and probably ignore it, not knowing who or what it was addressed to.